Carl and Liam here from Games, Brains and Head-Banging Life, gbhblofficial.com for short, and it's We're Afraid of the Dark. Episode 12, Season 1, the penultimate episode of Season 1. The Tale of the Prom Queen, written by Chloe Brown and directed by Jean-Marie Comio. It is The Tale of the Prom Queen. The name felt familiar, and then I watched it, and similar to some of the other previous episodes, it was a nostalgic jolt. Partially because its story is familiar in that it's using a story that's been told in other ways, in different ways and elements like that. But the characters, the faces and the people, all of that was like, oh my God, I remember seeing this when I was younger. I really did.
It's quite interesting to come across the particular ones that do spark that for you, because it seems quite random.
It's very random. I can only presume it was where they were aired and occasionally catching them on terrestrial TV. And it's not about like content, because I would make the argument that this might be one of the more scariest ones, I think, because of what it deals with, the subject matter, more than anything else.
Yeah, I do think this is definitely probably one of, especially from the first season, it's one of the more highlighted ones, because I think the ending is quite interesting, let's put it that way.
I like it. I'm going to say it right now. I like this one a lot.
I do as well.
Okay, cast. We got Katie Griffin, who plays Dee Dee, and another character. Oh, I'm going to say it. And Judy Larson plays two characters here. Graham Millington as Jam. Yes, J-A-M. What is with this show?
It's got to be a running gag, like I said in the previous episode. It must be.
It has to be. Andre Todorick as Greg, Amarius Godfrey as Chuck, Irene Kessler as the librarian, and Matthew McKay as Ricky Mitchell. That is our cast. That's pretty much everyone, actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Storyteller, it's Kirsten, her second story. And if you want to know what the other one was, it was the pretty boring and forgettable The Tale of the Hungry Hounds.
That's quite interesting that she told both these stories, because they do have a sort of similar vibe, I would say.
One thing I will give her credit for is both the previous episode and this one, she has an air of dramatics about her, does Kirsten?
Yeah, I was actually one of my first notes is that I appreciate the theatre she brings to the beginning of her story. You know, it's got to admire their creativity.
Agreed, because we begin in spooky fashion as a ghostly maiden in a white gown slowly advances on the campfire where everyone else is just waiting. But of course, it turns out they were waiting for Kirsten, and they are sick of her being late. We get a familiar thread here again, where there's a lot of bitching about her behind her back. We've had this previously where they bitch about her makeup and her prima donna ways and stuff like this. And I'm like, God, you guys are dicks to her.
Yeah, but it does make some sense, I suppose, knowing that they're not friends and stuff like that. But then it's like sometimes they take it a little bit too far, I suppose, if they're supposed to remain, you know, in good spirits for telling these stories and just generally getting along, you know.
Yep.
But I guess young people argue and stuff like that, and it's a little mean-spirited, but yeah.
Young people are bitches behind each other's backs anyway. It is what it is. The ghostly figure approaches, causing the group to jump up and huddle together. But they quickly realize it's just Kirsten and they start to relax. And here she starts to kind of like talk in this kind of ghostly, wispy way. And there's again a brilliant scene where she momentarily has to break character to tell Eric to shut up because she's trying to create an effect. And that made me laugh, which is just like, shut up, Eric, I'm trying to create an effect.
Yeah.
It made me laugh. She claims her tale is one of woe and has been told around many campfires. However, her version is the true version. And it is actually something. It's a little bit of an urban legend, and there is different variations on it. And it's been used in horror movies as well. It is the urban legend surrounding Resurrection Mary. Go Google that if you want to know a little bit more about it and what variation might even exist that you might be aware of in your life. Either was told to you when you were younger, or you've heard recently, or it's a fable in your town and so on. There is so many different variations. Submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society, it is the tale of the Prom Queen. Kirsten decides to stay in character, telling us about a teenage girl who is laying flowers at a gravestone. And as she leaves, she is disturbed by sinister laughing and startled by some birds. She continues through the graveyard, but then scared by two men. Now, this is where this episode really changes a lot of things. And I say men, not young teenagers, grown-ass men, Greg and Jam. And we should note the girl we've been following on. When I say teenage girl, I am talking about like 17, 18, even 19 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's immediately got the impression that this is going to be a better episode just because we got our actors that are a little bit older. And that's kind of like what I remember Eye for the Dark having over Goosebumps. So it's been interesting going back and watching it and seeing actually a lot of that's not necessarily the case, really. There is a lot of younger actors, at least in these first episodes. But I do feel like, at least my memory, if it serves me right, as it goes along, we do get more of older actors, and that's why the acting level is a bit higher in Eye for the Dark compared to Goosebumps, in my memory anyway.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is, and there's always an expectation when you sort of see this, like, okay, maybe they've got a few more acting gigs under their belt, because that's the thing. You can be a good child actor, but perhaps you don't have as many jobs, so you haven't had as much like chance to improve and be, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine if you were an aspiring young actor, something like Eye for the Dark or Goosebumps would be a sort of starting point out for you to like hone your craft, kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, one of the most famous, remember, from Goosebumps child actors and now is a young Ryan Gosling, and I'm pretty sure he's done okay for himself these days.
And Hayden Christensen as well was in an episode.
Yeah, I'm still going to say Ryan Gosling's done a bit better than Hayden Christensen.
Yeah.
Love Hayden. Anyway, they introduced themselves and revealed that they're looking for a ghost, and then I was immediately like, wait, aren't you supposed to be adults? Do you mean you're looking for a ghost? But specifically, it's a ghost that will appear on prom night, which is coming up, apparently. And they're surprised that she doesn't know the story of the prom queen. So they decide to tell her the story. So, a long time ago, a girl was waiting for a prom date, and she was hit by a car in the fog. It was a hit and run. She died and was buried in her prom dress. Naturally, this resulted in a ghostly legend said that every year on prom night, her ghost waits at the gates of the cemetery for a ride that never comes. And the retelling of this story filled in it was this moment where I went, oh shit, I remember how this story goes.
Straight away, you got it.
Right here. It just all came flooding back to me. In fact, I could almost hear, and without having seen it, the music that plays on the car radio.
Wow, that must have been quite a spark in your mind right there.
The fellas claim that they're going to wait to see if the story is true and invite Dee Dee, which is the girl, to join them. She thinks about it and then decides, you know what, this could be fun. Yeah, I'm going to hang around in a cemetery with two strange men that I've just met to see a ghost. Yeah, that's a really fun thing to do.
Yeah. Totally.
But then we cut to some time after, and the trio are having milkshakes and discussing the fact that they couldn't find the prom queen's grave. So I guess in the gap, they'd gone looking for it. Greg figures it'd be a good idea to try and find out if the accident even happened, and they come up with the idea of checking out the records in the library using a microfilm reader. There, they find it and learn the details of the dead girl's story. Now, I'm going to criticize this episode here. This is filler. They literally had the beginning and the ending and didn't have enough meat to tell the middle part to get to the end. So what they've done is they've filled in this weird little investigation part that really doesn't make a lot of sense, because it's like, well, why didn't they do this before? Also, if this story is so commonly known, you would already know all these facts. It's like, what, you just learned it today, guys, you know?
Yeah, I can see that.
Anyway, the dead girl's name was Judy Larson, and her boyfriend's name was Ricky Mitchell. And it turns out the story was true, but with a surprising added twist of just darkness to it, as Ricky was devastated when he found out that his prom date had died, so drove his car off a bridge into a lake, killing himself. And it's like, oh, well, that's just lovely.
Yeah, well.
Although apparently he and the car were never found. So there's that little air of mystery too.
Wonder if that'll be a relevant plot point.
They're then made to jump by the librarian, who offers them tea, so you get a little jump scare there. And after that, the trio talk about what they found out, and Dee Dee suggests, look, why don't we try to contact Ricky to tell them to pick Judy up, like, you know, like to sort of end this curse. So they decide, as all people normally do, they decide on doing a seance. And it's okay, all right, yep, as you do.
Casual.
They agree to meet back up at the lake later that night. Jam leaves, and here we get a brief scene of where Andy kind of reveals or like suggests to Dee Dee that he might be, you know, like her in a little way and stuff like that. It's irrelevant again because there's no it's never built upon, and it means nothing at the end.
Yeah, that's true.
So that night, they look at the spot Ricky supposedly went off the bridge from land. And Dee Dee says, look, we can't do it here because it's not where it happened. And look, man, even if you're not me, who already remembered the ending, you'll know where this is going. It kind of starts to signpost itself really strongly. And I didn't love that. I thought it could have been a little bit more coy with it.
Yeah, even though I do like where it goes, I do agree it does feel as if there's only one direction it can go for it to actually lead to anything. So that's a bit of an issue with it, I think.
Agreed. And like I said, I'm happy with it because it's one of those sometimes where the best result, the most predictable result is still the best result.
Yeah, I mean, even if you know the twist of something, if the story's still well told, I think it's okay. Yeah.
Yep. Yes, indeed. But I actually really liked as well. I like the look of the location. So they're standing at the edge of this lake because they're going to get in a motorboat and basically go drive to the spot where his car went off the lake and then do the seance there. But you've got this wonderful looking bridge that it reminded me of Lost Boys. Do you remember the bridge they hang off of Lost Boys? That incredible scene kind of reminded me of that.
Yeah, there's some really nice sort of ghostly visuals in this
Well, even
episode.
the graveyard itself is fantastic looking.
Yeah, definitely.
The seance seems to work because at first they see bubbles. Bubbles starting to rise. And then they hear what sounds like the sound of an engine coming from below the water. It freaks them out. They try to get away, but now the rowboat's engine won't start, so they have to row away. And all while these bubbles follow them to the shore. It's actually quite a well done, frightening, tense scene. I didn't mind it.
Yeah, it's not bad.
But even after all that, they still decide to carry on. Oh, they kind of, the only thing I will complain about is they are a little bit dismissive of that because, all right, fair enough. Let's say it's still unusual. You may not think there was a car with a dead prom guy in it, but it's still an unusual thing that happened.
That's true.
We get the briefest of scenes back at the campfire as Kristen continues her melodramatic performance. Now, though, apparently knowing the name of the victim, the group are able to find Judy's grave. When we go back to them, they've now found Judy's grave in it because they now know who it was. And again, that's when I'm like, why the fuck didn't, you know, that should have been done before. It's just the fillery part of this episode.
Yeah, considering the length, to have filler in any of these episodes is kind of poor, really.
Yeah, agreed. Undecided about what to do, Jam points at a spot that allows them to see both the road and the grave. We can stand there and we can see the grave and we can see the road. Okay, cool. Yeah. Greg, though, asks Dee Dee if she actually believes this. Like, he's getting a little bit like, what are we doing here? Do you actually believe this is real? I was just kind of having fun, that kind of thing. And even she sort of says that I'm unsure about this, but I am willing to see what happens. And I admit, if I was in this scenario at this stage, I think I'd feel the same. I'd be like, look, it's not about whether I believe or not, but hell, we're here now. Let's just stay. If nothing happens, then we know it was all for nothing.
Definitely.
As they wait in the cold, they hear wind chimes, and then they see a ghost in the distance, or, as it clearly is, somebody wearing a white cloak, obviously. Greg refuses to believe it, though, confronting the ghost to discover that this is Jam's cousin named Chuck playing a prank, and it was all Jam's idea, who now reveals he doesn't believe in ghosts and mocks the events on the lake. I was a bit like, where did this come from? This came out, this is quite like out of nowhere. He was all in, up, and suddenly what he decided, I don't believe it, I'm going to play a prank.
Flip-flopping, man.
Indeed. Greg is mad. He is mad about this, but to the sound of church bells start ringing in the distance, Dee Dee notices a car approaching on the road. Greg, hey, it's just a caretaker. He's probably been spotted and we shouldn't be here. And he's about to leave, but Dee Dee points out the song that is playing from the car. And it's got a kind of like, what do you call it? Doo-woppy, rock doo-woppy, boo-wop, boo-wop, that kind of thing, you know? Thing you'd expect from a certain era.
Yeah.
Seeing the car up close, they realize it's Ricky's car and that he is actually driving it. Now, if you're hoping that he's going to look like, have you seen Creep Show, the original Creep Show? Do you remember the segment in starring Leslie Nielsen, Ted Danson?
Yeah.
Do you remember when they come back after being killed and how they look as monsters, waterlogged monsters with slime dripping off them and all that? That's kind of what I was hoping it'd look like in the car. Unfortunately, he just looks like a normal boy.
Oh,
damn it.
Disappointing.
Indeed, indeed. And of course, you're going to get your big reveal here now as that Dee Dee is actually Judy and that she's been trapped in the graveyard waiting for someone to come along and solve the mystery. That line drove me nuts. What fucking mystery?
Yeah.
What was the mystery?
What is a mystery? Yeah. Good question.
She would have been better off saying, I've been waiting for someone to contact Ricky. Because truth be told, most people who probably did stay in the graveyard to see if she appeared and all that probably would never have done the other part, which was a seance to bring Ricky back from the grave. Do you see what I mean? And tell him that she needs to come and meet him. Say that part. I'm waiting for someone to come and contact Ricky so he could pick me up. Problem solved.
Yeah, that's it. Simple.
We now see she is the prom queen, dressed like a prom queen, and she leaves with Ricky in the mist, driving through the gates like ghosts. It's a really strong ending. It's got a touch of emotion in the sense that while they are reunited, it doesn't change the fact that they are both dead. They both died in horrible ways and both unfortunate accidents. And while reunited, nonetheless, it is a sad ending of that. I always think that is done powerful.
Yeah, I do think that is a really strong visual. I always really love that. I think that's one of the things that sticks with you from this episode is that visual of her getting into the car with the music playing, like you said, from that type of era music and driving off into the fog. I think it's a really effective visual. Yeah, like it a lot.
It is, and unfortunately, like I'd say, try not to overthink too much of what this episode does because immediately it's like one of those threads where if you pull this one very, very simply, it all falls apart because you could ask the question about if she's been haunting this graveyard, what, every fucking night? So nobody else has ever come along that she's ever been able to talk to and speak or communicate with. Why was she dressed? How could she be Dee Dee? Like, how could she be in normal clothes? But also, she said she's trapped in the graveyard, yet we see her go and get milkshakes. She drinks milkshakes with them. She's drinking one. We see her in the library. You left the graveyard.
Yeah, it's actually one of my biggest pet peeves and things is cryptic ghosts. I really hate that because a thing where there's a ghost wants a murder to be solved. You've seen the movie What Lies Beneath with Harrison Ford. That's got one of the biggest offenders of cryptic ghosts.
Michelle Pfeiffer, Harrison Ford. Yeah,
they're like putting messages on the mirror, cryptic things like question mark and shit like that. It's just be more straightforward with what you want to have happen, and then maybe you'll be able to rest in peace, right? That's what you want. That's what you want to be reunited with your great love. How about just come up straight out and say with it instead of fucking around, man? Yeah,
it is a story that falls apart so easily. So your best bet is to not look into this one and just enjoy the beginning and end and how it comes together and the variation on Resurrection Mary, because it even ends when we go back to the Midnight Society. It literally ends really quickly as Kirsten just takes her veil off and ends the tale, and then it's just like, oh, good story, and that's it. And it's like, oh wow, that was it.
That's kind of the funny thing, if you think about it, you break it down, because we're praising it for certain visuals, but they, as the campmates, don't get to see that. They just get to hear her description of it, so they don't. Maybe that's why they're a bit disappointed. I also thought the reason why this episode isn't a great episode is because it isn't scary. It's if they're there to be scared in the Midnight Society. I mean, it's still tell scary stories, and it obviously kind of feels that because ultimately the ending is a happy one, it's a somber, happy ending.
It's a romance.
Reunited. It's a romance, and it won't haunt their dreams or anything. That kind of defeats the point. So they're not all going to go home, oh, that was terrifying. I guess, like you said, the whole idea of the telling the different stories and blah, blah, blah. Of course, there was death involved, that's horrific and whatnot, but it is ultimately a happy ending. And that's the final note that it kind of leaves you on, which is a different vibe to the other episode, I suppose. But I feel like Kristen has done this twice now, a little bit. I think the other episode was very similar in the way it kind of didn't really effectively have the scares.
It also suggests as well that she's got a little bit of obsession about ghosts from a different time period, because obviously the Tyler the Hungry Hounds ones is based around a ghost that possesses through the suit and the dreamlike visuals that come from that as well. So there is imagination in her stories, but often you are right, it doesn't result in something particularly terrifying, scary, or even frightening. It almost has, dare I say, a teenage girl aspect, which is like the romance of this one, because I could believe that she thinks this is a romantic story, you know?
That's true. That's true. There was another thing I wanted to know though, is near the ending when they drive up in the car, it kind of made me think that like, what the hell do the people left behind seeing the car drive away think? Because one of the final shots of the episode is this like bewildered look on their faces. They're probably like thinking like WTF, what the hell just happened? And I kind of just made me think of like, what did they do afterwards a little bit?
Yeah.
I know obviously you could think that about like any episode, like what happened next, but it did make me think that a little bit. But
This is a strong example of that, actually. I think you are right. And I actually give this some thought as well. And I always try to rationalize that as how the human mind works. They'll separate. I'll separate. And as the days go by and the weeks go by, they'll start to question their own eyes and what they really saw. And then one of them will say, well, no, it didn't really happen that way and this, that, whatever. And eventually it'll just be like, no, that never really happened. And we imagined this or this happened and so on. Ask around about Dee Dee. Nobody's ever heard of her. You know, things like that. That's what I always think would likely happen.
Of course, people will always try and rationalize anything, so that's most likely. But I thought it was quite funny because they do just looks like what the hell's going on a little bit on their faces, which is fair enough, of course. Yeah, I do still like the episode. I think it's it's a solid, simple story, you know, which it works well enough. It's got that sort of slow burn thing going on, which you know some of the episodes don't have as much. I think it like stands out being a little bit more unique in that regard. Like you said, a bit too much filler, I suppose, which is unfortunate.
It's just the middle, yeah.
Yeah, but I think the little twist at the end, even though like we both said, it's unfortunately maybe because of our age, we see it as being quite predictable. Because like we said, where else could it really go? That seems like the only direction it's heading in a lot of ways. But yeah, I think it's still an improvement in some ways to other episodes. So there's that.
Before we wrap this up, if you want to see a unique horror movie that does a variation on the Resurrection Mary tale, go see Prom Night 2. Hello, Mary Lou. It is 80s fucking gold, but not for children. Be warned.
Yeah, going from this to that.
I just wanted to mention it because Resurrection Mary just kept making me think of Mary Lou. But that is the tale of the Prom Queen, episode 12, the penultimate episode of season 1 of Are You Afraid of the Dark? You got any thoughts on it? You know what to do? Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you'd like to see more content like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button. It is gratefully appreciated. You can find us over at gbhbl.com, our full website where reviews, news and so much more goes up daily. We're also on all social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, at gbhbl. Just search for gbhbl and you will find us out there. We also have merchandise on sale. You can access the shop via the website.